Welcome back to Figuring It Out. I'm Rachel Lee. If you're new here, this is a space where we talk honestly about life, relationships, healing, grief, emotional patterns, basically all the complicated human stuff people usually try to just simplify online. Also, if something in this episode resonates with you, make sure you are following the podcast, leave a review, or send it to somebody who might need to hear it too. All right, here we go. So I've been thinking about something lately. Can someone love you and still disappoint you? Not because they're a bad person, not because they don't care, not because they're intentionally trying to hurt you, but in fact, because they're human. And if I'm being honest, this was kind of a hard lesson that I have had to learn for myself. And truthfully, I don't think I've fully learned it yet. I think, like some other things, I'm still figuring it out. So let's talk about it. And to be fair, at the time that this had occurred, I didn't think about any of these types of things, right? I didn't even know enough about myself or other people to think about it, to be fully transparent there. So it really wasn't until years later that I started looking back on some conversations differently. Here's what I'm talking about. There was a conversation I had had with my mom after my dad had passed away, and she was expressing that, she was upset that my dad didn't tell her every day that he loved her or tell her how beautiful he thought she was. And honestly, she was probably right. My dad wasn't the guy who walked around talking about his feelings all the time. He wasn't sitting there writing love letters. He wasn't standing in the kitchen every morning making grand declarations of love. To be fair, he was out the door by about 5:30 every morning, the latest, to go to work. And that just wasn't him. He was the kind of guy that if my mom was up late doing lesson plans, he'd go to 7-Eleven and get her a Diet Coke. If her car needed work, he'd be outside fixing it until whatever time he finished. If something broke, he handled it. If she wanted a certain color on her Saltillo tile, he did that until she approved. So he was the handler, the taking care of things, if you will. And as I got older, I started thinking, well, maybe he was saying it, just not in the way she wanted to hear it. And maybe that's where a lot of disappointment starts. Not because someone doesn't love us, but because they're showing love differently than we're expecting. Honest moment here. I have done this in my own relationships. I have expected people to show up the way I would. I 100% have expected them to communicate the way I would, love the way I would, support people the way I would. And when they didn't, I felt disappointed. I felt hurt. I felt like something was missing. But here's what I've learned. They're not me. And as obvious as that sounds, which I know that's what you're thinking right now, I think a lot of us forget it. We assume people should react the way we would react, handle things the way we would handle them, express care the way we would express it. And then we feel let down when they don't. The older I have gotten, the more I realize that expectation has caused a lot of my disappointment. Not all of it, but definitely some of it. The thing that keeps me grounded in this conversation is remembering that I've been on both sides. Have I disappointed people? Absolutely, without question. Have there been people I loved deeply who still didn't get what they needed from me? Probably. Have there been times when I thought I was showing up and they felt unsupported? Oh, I'm sure there have been those times. But that doesn't mean I didn't love them. It means I'm human. Because loving someone and knowing exactly what they need are two completely different things. Sometimes we act like if love is there, everything else should automatically fall into place. Funny, that's not how life works. Love is one thing, communication, another, awareness, another, emotional capacity is another one as well. They're all separate skills here. And most of us are learning them as we go along in this thing called life. And this is where I've learned something really annoying about my personal growth. One thing I've learned about myself in the last couple of years is that I hate being ignored. And before anybody gets smart, yes, I know exactly where it comes from. So let me say this, like if we know one another, let's say we're in the same room, we make eye contact and then you act like I don't exist. Yeah, that bothers me. Now, you may have a perfectly good reason in your mind for it, right? But it bothers me. And I've spent enough time working on myself to know why. It goes back to feeling unseen. It goes back to feeling invisible. It goes back to some old stuff I've had to work through. And here's the really frustrating part. Being aware of it doesn't automatically make it go away. I can understand it and still feel it. I can recognize it and still get triggered by it. I think that's important because awareness is helpful, but awareness isn't the same thing as healing. So sometimes, in essence, you know exactly why something hurts, but it still fucking hurts. You just recover faster because you understand what's actually happening there. Which brings me to the next part I'm actively learning still. I'm still learning how to tell people what I need. I'm still learning how to communicate what makes me feel loved. I'm still learning how to ask people what they need. And I'm still trying to figure out how to do that without turning every important conversation into a hostage negotiation. Because here's the truth, people aren't mind readers as much as we'd like them to be. But thank God they're not, because wow. Sometimes we're disappointed because we never communicated what we needed in the first place. Sometimes we're disappointed because we're expecting movie level mind reading. Sometimes we're disappointed because the person just genuinely doesn't know. And sometimes we're disappointed because they simply don't have the capacity to give us what we're asking for. You just have to make sure you're asking though, because those are all very different situations. And it's important to know the difference between all of them. And here's why it matters. The way someone treats you is often a reflection of their awareness, emotional capacity, experiences, and limitations. So you have to remember that it's not automatically like a reflection of your worth. And it could be hard sometimes to remember that in the moment, but it's really important to at least try to. So before we wrap up, if there's one thing I've been thinking about while putting this episode together and what I want you to take from this is I'm really grateful for the people who have crossed my path. Not because every relationship was perfect, not because every person stayed even. And believe me when I say this, not because nobody ever disappointed me, but because every one of them taught me something. People challenged me. People inspired me to grow. People made me ask questions about myself I probably wouldn't have asked otherwise. Truthfully, not always comfortable questions either. and not always easy lessons, but valuable ones. Because the truth is, since I understand people differently than I used to, I'm able to understand myself differently than I used to. So, the answer to the question, can someone love you and still disappoint you? I think the answer is yes. I've lived it, I've watched it, and I've also probably been the one person doing the disappointing too. But I don't think it's like a failure of love, though. I think it's just part of being human, you know? And if we're paying attention, I guess every relationship is going to leave us with something, right? A lesson, a realization, a new perspective, something that helps us become a little wiser than we were before, God willing. At least that's what I'm figuring out. Maybe you are too. I'm Rachel Lee, and I'll see you next week as we keep figuring it out.